Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. I cannot believe, I'm looking down at these books and I'm like, I cannot believe that October is almost over. We have one more day of October and then it's Christmas, and then it's Christmas. No, before I know it, I'll be sitting here and I'll be like, I cannot believe that the year is almost over. I feel like the pool closed and then time just went really, really quick. I don't know why, it just feels like the fall went super, super fast. I know the fall is not technically over yet, but it is cold outside and it feels like winter is approaching quickly. I kind of try to welcome each season now. For years I'd be like, this is my favorite season, or that's my favorite season, and that's changed through the years. When I was younger, I loved certain seasons more than others, and through the years it's kind of changed a little bit. But now I try to welcome each changing of the season and just kind of try to look forward to, well, what are things about winter that I really, really love that I couldn't enjoy in the summer, and things like that. And I always make a joke when I'm at the pool in the summer and it's super, super hot and I'm talking to one of my neighbors and we're like, oh my God, it's so hot. It feels so good to get in the pool. I always say, remind me of this in February when there's 2 feet of snow outside and we don't even want to take one step outside. But I try to also appreciate that as well, the cold weather and whatever. And yesterday, it's interesting. I didn't think I was going to get into all of this today in this video. I thought I was just going to read some meditations. But, yesterday on my BookTube channel, I did this whole video about Margaret Wrinkle's The Comfort of Crows, which I read last year. And it's about 52 weeks of observations of life, kind of from her backyard. And it's perspectives on life through, the eyes of nature, and her looking at nature and things. And reading that book really gave me kind of a new perspective on the changing of seasons. Whereas I think that growing up, I would see fall as kind of like things are dying, and winter things are just kind of like dead and you don't see very many animals out. And then spring, it's like everything, is alive again. And then summer, it's like, oh, we're like right in the middle of life, And we talk about the seasons of life and all that. And I think we feel like that sometimes with aging too, it's like we get older, we think, okay, I'm like in the fall or winter of my life, so to speak. And I even remember this film strip that I saw as a kid, in school. I've talked about this a lot in my vlog. When I say this, people will try to find it for me. So many people have tried to find it for me. So many people have said, oh, is it this? Is it that? I don't know what it is. I believe, if I'm correct, it was one of those Buena Vista film strips that came from Disney or whatever way back in the day. It was just a film strip. And it had classical music in the background. And there was it didn't have any voiceover or anything. And it was just winter melting into spring, and it showed the animals coming out and the snow melting and the water trickling down the hillside or the mountain and whatever, and the flowers starting to grow. I don't know why I remember that. So I'm sure I only ever saw it one time as a kid, but it still is so vivid in my memory. But I even think that kind of gave me this groundwork for looking to the seasons and being fall is when everything starts to die, and then winter we're just closed up inside, especially in the Midwest where, we see the leaves changing and all that. And reading that book last year really changed my perspective on all of that, because she talks a lot about winter is actually the preparation for springtime, and what the animals are doing and why they're hibernating, and what the water system underneath the ground is doing, and fall, why the leaves are falling and what they do for the animals, and the animals can hide food there and stuff like that. And so it was just really interesting for me to read that and see that every season serves a purpose, which I don't know in life, I don't know that I've always felt that way. And so I'm trying to get better about that. I'm trying to have a better perspective going into each season, So with that long intro that I wasn't even going to say today, let's get into some meditation, shall we? Okay, let me look in the language of letting go and see what the meditation is for today. Oh, it's literally it is so short, you guys, and it is about self-value. Okay, we could maybe read that one. Is there one that I haven't read in here from the past couple days? Well, we'll just read that one and see what I have to say. And then let's go into Journey to the Heart, because I haven't read from that in a couple days, and see what it says in there. October 30th. Oh my God, Honor the seasons of the soul is what it is. Yesterday was the best is yet to come, and I was going to read that, and I hadn't read that. So maybe we'll read 2 out of this as well and see how it goes. October 30th. This is from the language of letting go. Self-value. We have a real life of our own. Yes, we do. That empty feeling, that sense that everyone except us has a life, an important life, a valuable life, a better life, is a remnant from the past. It is also a self-defeating belief that is inaccurate. We are real. So is our life. Jump into it and we'll see. Today I will live my life and treasure it as mine. I have a lot of thoughts about this actually being such a short meditation. This idea of comparing ourselves to other people, I've had several lessons in my life about this. It's a friend of mine years ago, I can't even remember the context of the conversation, but we were talking about something, I was talking about something about comparing my life to other people. You know, I've shared this a lot in my vlog that I always felt like I was kind of playing catch up. And I can remember telling my mom that when I got, like after I got sober, my mom and I would have these real deep conversations, and she always felt real guilty about it. And she said, I think I started you in school too early. It's interesting when I talk about this on like my vlog now, because people will say like, oh, I didn't turn that age until like November, and I started school the same year too. But my birthday's June 29th. And so typically, and I started like, I think the cutoff when I started school was like, if you didn't turn like 6 or 7 or whatever the age is for first grade by like August 1st, then you had to go to the next, you would go to the next grade. Does that make sense? And so my mom was like, should we wait until the next year or should we put him in? And so she put me in, and I was always one of the youngest kids in my class. And like I didn't turn 18 until after I graduated from high school. I remember that being really significant for me because all of my friends had turned, like my best friend, who I've talked about in a lot of my videos, she was my best friend from elementary, junior high, high school, college, graduate school. She turned 18 August before we went into being seniors in high school. And most of my friends did. Like, you know, I had a group of 5 or 6 girlfriends that I hung out with, and almost all of them turned 18 like between August and December of the previous year. So our senior year, they were all 18. And I can remember that, and I can remember always kind of feeling behind. I related a lot today to sobriety, but I don't think it was just necessarily about sobriety. My mom felt real guilty about that. I do remember that, always feeling like I was the youngest kid in class. I do remember feeling that way, but I don't think that's necessarily where it all comes from. When I got sober, and I got sober at 22 and a half, I felt like I was playing, and when I got sober, today there's so many young people that are getting sober, much younger than I was when I got sober. But when I got sober, I can remember, like, I would go to meetings and people would say things to me that were a lot older than me. Then, like, they would say things like, I spilled more alcohol than you drank. And so it was always like this age differential, right? Like, I wasn't enough of an alcoholic and addict for their terms, but I was too much of an alcoholic and addict for people that were my age, if that makes sense. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like that today, but when I got sober in 1994, it was very much like that. And I'm grateful for those, like, old-timers saying that stuff to me today, because, you know, in retrospect, it's kind of funny, but... And some of those people that said it to me are my dearest friends today, or have been in life. But I can remember that I always kind of felt like I was playing catch up. And then with people that, you know, weren't addicts and alcoholics once I got sober, friends of mine that I had known for a long time, you know, they were like, I was getting sober and I still had a year left of school, and they had graduated and were going on to graduate school, law school, medical school. They were having like their first real careers, or moving away. They're having their own apartments. They were getting married. You know, some of them had kids within a couple years. And I always felt like I was playing catch up. And that really affected my self-value and my self-worth, because feeling like I don't measure up to somebody else made me feel like, I'm just thinking, this is so bizarre. This is the shortest meditation. I have so much to say about it. But it really affected my self-value, because I thought, I can't measure up to where they are, and I never will be able to, you know? And in fact, I can remember, and I've shared this story as well, when I was in treatment, the only time I had visitors, I didn't want anybody to visit me, was on Christmas Day, and 2 of my friends came to visit me, and they were kind of filling me in on what everybody was doing. And a friend of mine that I had like partied with a lot and was like a pastry chef, and he had moved to New York, and they were telling me that he and his partner had like bought this apartment and they were redoing it. And I mean, it was very adult stuff. And I was like, the party has stopped, and I didn't even realize it. And I always kind of felt like that. I always felt like I was playing catch up. And so even though I got sober and I was doing the right thing and all this kind of stuff, you know, and I don't know, I always kind of felt like, I'm not where everybody else is. And even like when I went to graduate school and stuff like that, it was interesting because when I was in graduate school, the age groups of graduate school when I got my master's degree in social work was very different. There were like a lot of younger people that were coming in right out of getting their bachelor's degree. And most of them were like bachelor's in social work people. So whereas my program was 2 years, they would come in and they would do an advanced standing program that was a year. So they would graduate, and then that summer before the program started, they would start graduate school, do an internship. So they only did a year. So I felt like I wasn't where they were. But then I was with a lot of people that were a lot older, and they had already had 20 and 30-year careers. This was like their second career that they were coming back for. And I can remember hearing them sharing classes, you know, about their children, their grandchildren, these careers they had. And I thought, like, I don't measure up to any of this. Then years ago, I had a friend of mine that we were talking about all this or some of it, and he said, you always lose by comparison. When you compare your life to somebody else, you're always going to lose because there's always going to be somebody that has it better than you, right? So we don't compare ourselves typically to people that have a lot less than us or, you know, have had more troubles in their life. We always compare ourselves to somebody that has it 10 times better, a nicer house, more money, easier way. We always compare it to that without even really knowing what their circumstances are. I think that's the other thing I've learned in my 53 years is that a lot of people that I compared my life to through the years, some of them had fantastic lives, but many of them did not. Many of them were spending way beyond their means, and they were not in happy relationships, and they weren't happy themselves. And I didn't know that at the time because what they presented was picture perfect. And so I was comparing myself to something. It's very much like I feel like social media today, where we see something on social media and we feel like that's what our life should look like, but that's not really a true representation most times. And I felt like that a lot, you know? And so I can remember having that conversation with him. That kind of like shifted my whole perspective. I also remember going to my high school reunion, my 20-year high school reunion. I went with my husband, and I went with a good friend of mine from high school. And people were very, very nice to me. The 10-year was kind of, it was a bore ass, but the 20-year was completely different. People were very relaxed. They were very just like calm and stuff. And I can remember going there, and my life, to be honest with you, was I didn't have very much money. I could pay my bills and get by, but my husband and I were taking like, you know, weekend trips that were very cheap every once in a while. And I don't know, it was like we were having a lot of fun, but I can remember like date night for us. I was paying off a lot of debt, and date night was like Applebee's 2 for $20, and we would buy a movie $9.99 from Walmart because that was what we could afford, you know? And I can remember laying on the bed here with the dogs and stuff, and we would get these popcorn bowls and whatever. And that was what my life was like. And I can remember like, but it was also a period of time that we were having a lot of fun and going out and doing a lot of stuff. And I remember people coming up to me and being like, oh my God, like, you look like you're having so much fun. Like, you guys went here and you went there. And I'm thinking in my head as they're saying this to me, I've seen your house, like, on Facebook. Like, you have a $500,000 home, you know? Like, and I don't. And I have a 1,200 square foot condo that was my mother's, you know? And yeah, we go out of town, but we like stay in the cheapest hotel. Yeah, we have a great time. And I think that was it. It was like, I look back on those times, and those were some of the best times of my entire life. You know, I wasn't consumed with what I had or how much money I had or whatever, you know, and it wasn't ever about that. And I think that was maybe in retrospect what they saw in me was that there were so many people that were so interested in my life, like what they had seen and pictures and what they had heard people say, like, oh my God, Peter did this, or, you know, whatever. And I look back at that, it's like, my life was fun at that time. It really, really was. Like, we were having a lot of fun, you know? But I didn't think going into that reunion, that was what people would be interested in. I thought, you know, I was about 40 at the time or whatever, I guess. I was 38. I thought, you know, people would be interested in, because the 10-year was very much like, you know, where do you work? What do you do? That kind of thing. And the 20 wasn't like that at all. And so I think, like, especially like going into your 40s, you kind of look at your life differently, you know? Ever since that moment, I've done my best, and I don't always do this, but I try not to compare myself to other people in my life. And it really taught me a valuable lesson that I'm on my own journey for life, you know? And like, especially like going through circumstances where somebody might go through something and I go through something and they look very similar, but the outcome is completely different. Like, that was hard for me to understand early on. And what I realized is that our journeys are completely different. That started when I was using, and I can remember, like, I had friends of mine that would use just as hard as I did and just as much as I did, but they didn't end up in treatment. Some of them aren't even sober today, you know, and they didn't have the same consequences that I did or the same hardships that I did. My journey was different, and today I respect that. Today I respect that my journey is different than somebody else's, and I don't compare my journey to somebody else's. What I'm supposed to learn and what somebody else is supposed to learn are two completely different things. So if I'm comparing my self-value to somebody else, what I'm really doing is I'm comparing my journey to them. And I'm always going to lose by comparison, because there is no comparison, because each and every single one of us has a very specific and different journey on this planet and in this lifetime. Very specific and different. You know, and you don't have to believe in a lot of spirituality to make up your own journey. You know, I do believe in that, and I do believe that there are certain things I'm supposed to learn while I'm here, but maybe you don't. And maybe for you, it's like you're developing your own journey. But even then, your journey is not going to look like somebody else's. So if you're basing your value on lookism or financial status or what somebody has or what kind of job they have versus you or what kind of talents they have compared to you or how they have it better than you do or whatever, we're always going to lose by comparison. You know, and I think that, like, to some degree, I've seen through time too that when I've talked to people, I can remember this was paramount for me, and this actually happened I would say, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I was actually at the casino, and I ran into somebody that I went to high school with. He was actually like this, like, major jock in high school, good grades, everything, and never mean to me. He was never somebody that bullied me, and was always very nice. And so we kind of ran into each other, and we were talking to each other. Maybe it was longer than that. I don't remember. I haven't been to the casino. It's been over a year since I've been to the casino here in Indiana. But we were talking, and he said something about school, and I said, you know, school was really hard for me. And he goes, school was really hard for me too. And I kind of was like, laughed, and I was like, yeah, I'm sure. And he said, no, seriously. He goes, it was. He goes, I know this is kind of hard to complain about. He goes, but like, if you had known my parents and you had known, like, he was like, I had an injury when I got into college. He got into a really great college, and he had an injury, and it took him out of playing football. And he was known as, like, the star and all this kind of stuff. And he was like, you know, like, I had to keep up these grades and all this kind of stuff. And he was like, it was really hard. Like, there was a level of perfectionism that I was held to that I felt like I had to upkeep. And I still see it, like, my life that way today. And he's like, and my life hasn't turned out that way today. He goes, I'm happy. He said, but my life hasn't turned out that way today. And he goes, I know that high school wasn't easy for you on a completely different level. He said, and I didn't deal with what you dealt with in high school, but I was dealing with something completely different. And I thought, oh my God, here it is again. Like, our journeys are never the same, right? And that doesn't diminish what I went through. It doesn't take it away from that, because just because he went through pain doesn't mean that I didn't as well. And here we are all struggling. If we can maybe talk to each other a little bit more about what we're going through and learn from each other. That was like an eye-opening moment for me, you know, that just because I had a lot of pain in high school doesn't mean that I had exclusive rights to that pain. There were a lot of other people that were going through pain. A lot of other people that probably still haven't talked about the pain that they were going through because it was hidden pain that they were suffering when they were that age, you know? And so that was a powerful moment for me. And I'm grateful that he opened up for me. I can see us, we're standing in the middle of the casino talking about it, you know? And so anyway, I'm grateful for those moments. And it's those moments that are teachable moments to me that I try to stay, you know, alert for and listen for, because it's always in the smallest moments that I hear things that I learn from the most. Okay, this has gone a little bit longer than I thought, over a 3-sentence meditation today, so I'm actually not going to get into Journeys of the Heart. I'm going to end it right here. But I hope that you guys are having a magically amazing day. I love you, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.